What? Whoops.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to just get a couple of pictures here. Here's Thumper. We'll get more of you later. There's Uncle Burr. Here's Granjan. I guess everyone else will go to. Tell us about your grandfather. Okay, or what?
My grandfather.
Okay.
My grandfather, James Alvin Farmer, who was a good friend of mine, and we were really good friends. As a matter of fact, during high school, I stayed with them at their home at 326 Portland Avenue in Belleville, and used to go to drive into high school with my aunt and Ruth Kindred. So, but anyhow, my grandfather was a lawyer who was self-taught, who was a self-taught school teacher in originally Mascoutah, Illinois, and then became a lawyer and eventually got to be a corporation lawyer.
What do you mean self-taught? Like,
in other words, he read law. He didn't go to law school formally. He didn't have beyond a 7th or 8th grade formal education.
I didn't know that.
And he told me how when he was a little boy that they had firecrackers. And one day he always used to make sure we had firecrackers and things and Easter eggs and always on the things. He gave us goodies, you know.
Yeah.
And of course, goodies were much more accessible. You didn't have to do what Burr did and sell them on the black market, you know, or by subterfuge. But at any rate, the point is that I was complaining about the fact that I only had 2 packs or something of firecrackers. And he said to me, he says, "Jim, don't you realize that when I was a boy, if I had 3 firecrackers, I had a lot." And that was a very impressive thing to me.
You still remember that? How old were you then?
I must have been 7 or 8 years old. And then a little bit later, somewhere along the line, I used to drive out to the hills, which is a little 30-acre farm.
Kind of like a homestead, yeah.
And I used to go out there and climb around the hills and shoot a BB gun and all that sort of thing, you know. But I'd go out with him and I'd accompany him almost every Saturday afternoon. And so he had a nice garden spot, and I think that's probably where the roots of my love for gardening started.
You know, your mother too. I have her old textbook from college.
Well, my mother when she went to Monticello in Alton, Illinois, and then which was like a high school or something, I don't know, junior college or something like that. But then she went to the University of Illinois, where she achieved quite high honors in, I think the word's animal husbandry, where they judge sheep and cattle and horses and stuff like that, you know. And so she was pretty knowledgeable, and she, of course, was a school teacher then for a time until...
She taught English?
She taught English, I believe.
Well, I have a textbook for her for vegetable production.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, from like 1903 or so. I mean, it was when the thing was published.
Uh-huh.
Then later she was interested in hydroponics. She wanted to do tomatoes in hydroponics. Remember when she... But I'm not sure that she ever followed through. But
She had a lot of interest. She really did.
Yeah.
And but anyhow, my grandfather, Farmer, he was district attorney, or state's attorney as they called it in St. Clair County. And the forerunners of the Capone gang and the Franklins and the Eatons, and these are all gangs from East St. Louis, Chicago circuit, you know, whatever it was, with dealing with whatever the hell they dealt with in the time, and racetracks and stuff like that. But anyhow, my grandfather carried a .32 pistol, and he said one day a guy came into his office and plunked $100,000 cash on his desk. And my grandfather said, "Take the goddamn stuff and get the hell out." He threw him out of his office with the cash. And I can only think, sort of having that go through my mind, $100,000 in IBM back about that time, and let it ride, what would it be now? You know, it staggers your mind. I mean, you could almost cancel the national debt with it, you know. So at any rate, though, I was always very proud of him. I thought that was great.
So that was your grandfather.
Yeah.
And your grandmother, she died of tuberculosis. Is that
My
right?
grandmother was a very wonderful gentlewoman, and she picked up tuberculosis somewhere along the line, maybe in the 1920s or so, and she was my mother's mother and my Aunt Arena's mother, Arena Farmer's mother. And at any rate, I can recall the house at 326 Portland Avenue, which is now turned into a rooming house, had a open-air type of porch where you could freeze your butt off, literally, from these open-air, all these windows that would open out.
Forget it.
And you just put on more bed clothing. So you have about 10 inches or 12 inches of bed clothing.
That was specifically to treat tuberculosis?
That was specifically to
They
treat
thought the
tuberculosis.
fresh air would
That's what
cure
they
it.
thought the fresh, that's when they didn't know anything about tuberculosis really at that time, or not much. And they thought that, for instance, up in the high places where you had the good air, that was good for it. And they had the Saranac Lake things and various tuberculosis sanatoriums at that time. And, but anyhow, my grandmother died, I think sometime in the 30s. And then my grandfather, that set the stage for my grandfather and my Aunt Arena, who lived together in that house, big house, allowed me to come over so I would study more in high school, which was a questionable thing as to whether I did or not, you know. I mean, I don't know if I did that or not.
What was the idea? Because you'd be away from the younger kids?
Well, I wouldn't have the distractions and so forth, and I were distractions and so forth. I think Dan Glunk's going to give us a call here. Is that Dan Glunk out there? A friend of mine. But anyhow, I used to tell him to come on in, Ed.
Mom.
Anyhow, shut up. My grandmother was a very nice person. She lived up in this this upstairs thing, which actually there were 2 rooms adjacent. It was a very nicely self-contained thing, and eventually, that's where I lived, when I was going to high school.
Which I didn't know until like a year ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But anyhow,
I don't know anything about your
But anyhow, oh gosh, and those are some good times for me, I must say.
Living with your grand
I was football manager.
manager, really?
Yeah, 4 years for the Belleville Township High School thing, and this man named Noel, Dick McKelvey, got him to send me a one of these. No, it's one of these books around here that has a history of the Belleville Township High School football thing, of which I'm nicely mentioned in there a couple of times. Well, yeah, it's no big deal, you know. But anyhow, but those were some nice days, though, and with my friends Healy, Denton, Heineman, Sprague.
You into jazz then?
What?
Were you into jazz then?
Oh yeah, I was in the.
What did your parents think of? I mean,
Well, my father, interestingly enough, felt it was much better for me to be on the other side of the dance floor than out on the dance floor itself. And he said, I'd much rather have you playing in the band, because a lot of the people that played in the band were older people, like Hook Lecker, you know, Ellsworth Lecker, who was, Hooker was, he had more self-confidence than any man I've ever known in my life. I mean, you know, the world could be falling apart, and he'd say, well, it could be worse or something, you know. He was a great guy, and he was a good influence. And of course, Buddy Shoulders and I started off in that band together. And in fact, Buddy claims that I got him his first gig because he said, you know any other good musicians? I was at rehearsal.
Right.
I said, well, I know a guy that plays trumpet, and he sounds pretty good to me. He said, bring him down. So Buddy came down, and in the bass, we had played previously in Doris Holm Walks. Lloyd Walk was a guy that interned with me, who lives in Belleville, who was a general surgeon, and married Doris Holm. And we were all friends, you know, back when I was interned at St. Louis City Hospital. But anyhow, I was a year or two ahead of Buddy in high school. But boy, I heard him, and I realized right there that this guy was a player. And we played Boy Meets Horn, the way Goodman played it. And
What band was this now? What kind
this
of?
was just a bunch of high school kids getting together. It was awful.
Like a big band, kind of like you had a line of saxes, or you had like 5 guys?
Oh,
or
I don't remember, but it
Yeah.
wasn't very good. I can tell you. I mean, Childers and I were the only guys in a band that had any concept of what it meant to have any discipline of swing
Yeah.
or of the jazz idiom of any kind. And I was really learning. I had a very steep learning curve at that point, you know.
Yeah.
So when we joined Lecker's band, we did with great enthusiasm, and we had some great times with that thing.
How old were you when you joined Lecter's band?
I was probably 16 years old, because, or maybe 15, because we both had to lie about our ages to get into the union.
Right.
And that was back in the time, if you'll recall,
Wait,
from a historical standpoint, they had 2 unions. They had the AFL,
And
and they had the CIO.
That's right.
And they did not amalgamate until 1953.
5.
55?
Yeah.
I thought it was 53.
Well, whatever. Anyway,
Okay.
I just took a course in unions, so.
Are you sure that it's not 53?
I'll bet you.
All right, well, maybe you're right.
Well, anyway, to the 50s, right? They were split, and they were certainly antagonistic at that point.
Yeah, but they joined ranks over. But anyhow,
So which one did you join?
this was back in around 19, and Buddy and I argued about this. I thought it was back around 1939 or 40. He claims we had 40 or 41. Well, hell's bells. I know that when Kenton's band, the first time that I heard Stan Kenton's orchestra was the night before Pearl Harbor down in St. Libory, Illinois, where Bubber Healy, my dear friend, along with Buddy Paul, Wally Rout, who visited with us, we got into a wrestling match with him, Hook Heineman, Russell Sprague, I think Jack Wallen was there. Jack Wallen was still alive then. He was killed in World War II. We had a wonderful bunch of guys, and we had a great time down in St. Libory, and it was they were playing poker or something like that. But I happened to start playing around with this shortwave or this radio receiver, and I picked up this thing called Stanley Blam Blam from the Hollywood Palladium, and hell, that was Stan Kenton, and because later. That was on December 5th. That was on our December 5th. It was thereabouts on December 5th, 1941. And of course, by that time, I had already been playing with Lecker's orchestra, King Saxon, and his orchestra. And one of my friends, John Nutzel, who's an internist, who was a Fidel friend of mine and a classmate at Washington University, and John Nutzel always used to refer to us as King Saxon and his musical Egyptians. So, at any rate, though, and he would never let up on that. Nuts, who's a good guy. And so, at any rate, that was the jazz thing in high school, and of course. When I was in a music store, Knapp's music store.
You worked there?
No. I was in there just looking at something or other or something. And all of a sudden, I happened to hear Kenton's first original records coming out of Decca Records. Because by that time, I had developed a real passion and a real love for Jimmy Lunsford's band.
Right.
And Lunsford's band, of course, had the precision that was not present in most black orchestras at the time. And Lunsford's band was really just a superb band. They did so many things well. And we had in our book, there's a guy named Eugene the Jeep Hughes, who came from, some little coal town up in Illinois, but who was a very good bass player and a very good musician. And he picked off the record and made an arrangement of the Lunsford band. So our sax section would go ahead and play this thing. Our band would play this Sleepy Time Gal, which was one of the standards to measure all saxophone sections against at the time. And as I recall, we used to play that thing pretty well. And Lunsford was so far ahead of his time in arranging and in doing things with dynamics and with time signatures, or not time signatures, but time values for a given note, the difference between a dotted eighth or a dotted quarter or something like that, and the amount of time that you would give it, it would make it sound bigger or longer or louder, and little tricks like that he used, which all you have to do is listen to Sleepy Time Gal, which was recorded about 1936 or 37, with a thing called Organ Grinder Swing on the other side. That's 78. And Lunsford was just so far ahead of himself, and he really had a marvelous band. He unfortunately died in the early 40s from what I'm not 100% certain, but he apparently had some kind of either a seizure disorder or a convulsive disorder of some sort when he was going to a job. And if I read between the lines correctly from the accounts that I've read, he probably had this kind of arrest or something happened to him. God only knows what. And as a result of that, somewhere along the line, he probably vomited and aspirated, which is, of course, a very common thing that can happen to people. And that's probably what killed him.
The Lunsford record was one of the first presents you gave me. You gave me a choice between Lunsford and something or other else, and I chose Lunsford. That was a early gift.
Great.
Oh my God, I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Well, at any rate, though, we got off away from grandmother.
Yeah.
Was that Gula?
No. Gula was on the other side.
All right. Who was the grandmother who had tuberculosis then?
That was grandmother Farmer,
Okay.
and that was my mother's mother,
Okay.
and Arena's mother, who had that tuberculosis. And
What was her first name?
God, I want to say Helen Keller, but that's not right. Helen. I think her name was Helen.
I thought it was Helen.
Helen.
I think it may have
You
been.
know, I just called her grandmother, but I can
Yeah.
recall still.
I
She
thought
was
it-
always so nice to us. But you know, back in those days, talk about the bullshit of AIDS and HIV positivity and all that stuff. When grandmother had tuberculosis, I can recall how they would bring her down to the first landing in the stairs, which there was 1, 2, top of the stairs. And they'd bring her down there when we'd have a family affair, and she'd sit up there like, 15, 20 feet away, and we wouldn't be able to go near her. We couldn't touch her.
Oh my God.
And so what she would do, though, she'd be up in her little open house and so forth. We'd be playing out in the backyard, and so she would have a string and a little cup, and she would wash a nickel or a dime with alcohol, and then she would lower it down to us, and we'd take it out like that. But we were not allowed to go near her, and that was, that was just the ignorance of the time. I mean, much like the horrible things the CDC has done to America, and the HIV and the AIDS business, today, the politicization.
What about psychology back then in child rearing? Didn't you say there was something about toilet training or something they did?
Oh, Christ, I don't remember that. Slim.
No?
But apparently my mother was steeped in the idea that you ought to have toilet training, you've got to do this, you got to do that. And she told me one time that you weren't supposed to pick up babies if they cried and stuff like that, and that was part of the academic bullshit at the time, which was in the 20s. I was born in 1924.
She had an expression about if you didn't go to the bathroom every day. And she said it was just like carrying it around in a
Oh yeah, she used to say,
paper
now,
bag.
it's just like carrying it around with a paper bag. So, but anyhow, in spite of all this, I think I got through some of the horrors of toilet training and whatever, and so that wasn't a problem.
What was it like? I realized you grew up in the Depression, right?
Yes, that's correct. We did.
I don't, recently,
Well,
what did you do?
Well, I'll tell you something. The Harrison Machine Works, which my dad had not yet been bumped by the Alice Chalmers, or whatever it was,
Combine or something. Thresher.
the combine.
What did they make? What did the machine
Well,
works make?
you see, the thresher, the double thresher would take the grain
That was already cut?
that was already cut and stacked, and it took several operations. You see, now the combine cut all that down, and I'm not an expert in this thing.
Oh, that made
But
it
I can
fun.
recall, going to places like the hills that had 12 acres of wheat, and they'd have a mowing day, and whatever the hell they do, and they
Well,
have a
they
threshing
slides or-
machine there. They have a steam engine with a long belt, which would drive the gears and so forth, and what they call the separator, and these things would you'd feed in the wheat from the shocks, which had been dried. They had their certain things. Rain could screw it up, you know. But anyhow, what you'd end up with, the wheat would come out pure here, and the straw would come into a pile over there, so you could save it. Now with a combine, you ended up with the wheat, but the straw was just scattered all over the place. But there were certain advantages to the combine, in that apparently, if you had a nice, bright, sunny day, you could go ahead and do it, and you weren't quite so dependent upon the weather, and you got rid of this initial cutting of the wheat and stacking it and all that sort of
Were those combines steam powered or?
No, they were gasoline powered, I believe. They were gasoline powered.
So the Harrison place just made steam engines.
Made steam engines, very fine. And they are now collector's items.
Mhm.
And you'll see an occasional one in some Globe Democrat, St. Louis Globe Democrat Sunday special. There'll be a section, and there'll
There are
be some
people who
beautiful.
save them. Yeah, they have
People
farm
rebuilt them and
antique
things like that.
farm equipment.
Some people from around
Clubs.
Pinckneyville, Illinois, and Southern Illinois, and things like that.
Yeah. Probably some rusted in barns somewhere too.
Oh,
So
I'm sure.
But
what
you
happened?
went down to the machine shop and talked to the guys. Didn't the guys make that little steam engine for you?
Well, that little steam engine that Slater has.
Yeah, I have it at school. And I use it
that
every
was
6
made
weeks.
for me by the workers at the machine shop, or my dad. Either maybe my dad made it. I don't know. But anyhow, I also one summer worked for 25 cents an hour, drilling axle holes for a subcontract in a war contract. These little oxygen or gas carrying things, acetylene, oxygen combination things that they would push around with
Oxyacetylene
rubber
station.
tires. And
Right.
there's some of which are still in existence today. You know, wasn't a bad thing. That was a.
They had regulators back then?
They have what?
To take from the high pressure to the...
Oh, I think so, Slater. Yeah.
Well,
At least they were able to move those tanks around. I don't know I don't recall the details of the regulators. We didn't get into that. But
You were into hole drilling.
I was just into drilling holes, and they used to call me the drill buster because, Christ, when you drill through steel,
Yeah.
when you're breaking out, if you're not careful, you'll
That's
break,
right.
You'll break the bit. And I broke so goddamn many of those things, really. And Shelley, a fellow named Shelley, who was a shop foreman, who was a wonderful, wonderful German technician,
Yeah.
who was just so good. And he must have been in his 60s or 70s then. But he'd come around and he'd check on me, and he would give me little tips here, little tips there, and I'd try to listen to what he said. But he was a good guy.
how old were you then?
How old were you? I
I was must have been 15 or 16 maybe. I don't know. Sort of hard to tell. I mean, it gets a little fuzzy.
I hear you.
How about the time when you ran away when you were 3?
Oh,
Yes,
God.
yes. I always like that.
I was barely able to walk, and for some reason or other, we lived down on South Douglas Avenue in a little house, which is really only about a block away from my grandfather's house, on South Douglas Avenue. And so our alley went right smack up towards the Douglas School and the Green Teapot and a little junction with Main Street, and then went on down North Douglas Avenue to that section, out there. So at any rate, for some damn reason, and this was back in a time, this must have been, I'm not sure just what year this was, but I had a little fire engine. And so I was familiar with certain things like Peter Rabbit, the story of Peter Rabbit, and Mr. McGregor, and things like that, And so anyhow, one day, for reasons I don't have the foggiest idea why, I start walking up the alley. I start walking north up the alley towards Main Street and the Douglas School. I had my fire engine, and I'd meet somebody 2 or 3 houses down, and they say, "How are you?" or "Who are you, little boy?" or something like that. And I'd say, "My name is Peter Rabbit." and I'd keep on walking. Cripes, I walked up, I crossed the street, I'll never know. And at the time, I don't think they even had a boulevard stop sign up there. Went on down North Douglas Avenue, and then somehow or other, an hour or 2 later, ended up at my Aunt Peg Shale's house. And Aunt Peg Shale was a sister of my father's mother, Gula Harrison. Here comes some more people. So at any rate, Aunt Peg said, "Well, Jim, what are you doing here?" And I don't know, but they called over and they found me and brought me home and all this sort of thing, and everything was fine, and put a little thing on paper about how I got.
I remember reading that in the scrapbook.
You read it in the scrapbook, yeah, I believe it.
You were 3 years old.
I don't know, 2.5, 3. I wasn't very old, I'll tell you that, because
Go on. Go on.
what?
I remember a story of when Slater and I went to the house in Belleville, and we were getting ready. You were closing it and stuff
My
like
mother
that.
died when
Right.
my mother died, yeah.
And
He was going to move to Florida.
right. And about how I can remember when I had been there sometime before, the little pool in the back and the thing for the alligator.
The fish pond.
Right. Tell the story about how the alligator got loose.
Oh,
right.
yeah.
Oh, yes, yes.
Start from the
Well,
beginning.
yes.
We had, somehow along the line, we used to go to Florida, because Daddy used to take his vacation, in the month of February or something like that. And so we brought back one of these dollar alligators and put it into the fish pond.
How big was it at the time?
The fish pond was perhaps maybe 4 feet by 5 feet by about maybe 2 feet deep. Or
You have goldfish in it or something?
we used to plug it up and go swimming in it and stuff like that. It wasn't that big a deal, but it was sort of a concrete veranda and all that sort of thing. So we put this alligator in there, and cripes, and for some reason or other, I don't know why, this alligator grew. And it got to the point where it was about 2.5, 3 feet long. And
What did you do during the winter? I mean, did it survive the winter?
Slater, I don't remember the details of that, because about that time, I was going away to school, and I was either in St. Louis or Philadelphia, and I just do not remember details of that, of how that came about, except I do know then somewhere along the line, in the 1950s maybe, they had a flood. And of course what happened, this alligator incidentally became the focal point for every dog in the neighborhood. And the dogs would come around and they'd look at this thing and bark at it. And they put their paws down in it and so forth, And the alligator, there was a little island out in the middle of the fish pond. And the alligator would just sit there and sun itself and, paying no attention. But anyhow, they had this flood. And so apparently what happened, and I think that this happened several times, one of the dogs would get too close and the alligator would nip at it. And the dog would pull back and it threw the alligator out of the fish pond. And so during this flood, there was a lady, there was a family named Goss, G-A-S-S, who lived catty corner from us across the alley. And Mr. Goss was a friend of Daddy's, and he was really a pretty good guy. But his wife was really, she was what would have been appropriately called a 5-star bitch. and she was always bitching about something that somebody in the neighborhood was doing, you know.
Like he was sexy.
Well, yeah, only,
Put up with all
yeah, I guess, yeah, she was sort of like that. Yeah. But anyhow, this alligator apparently crawled over into her backyard. and so she called the police. And she complained to the police that there was an alligator in her backyard, you know, and of course the policeman completely fluffed her, you know, and said, "I'm sorry, lady, we got too many things going on, we can't help you." And so, but anyhow, somehow or other, we got a hold of the alligator, got it back into the pond, and then eventually, I think I may have been going to Washington University at the time. And so I knew a lot of the people in the biology department, Hampton Carson, my dear friend Burr Steinbacher, and they had an aquarium or something over there. So I asked them if they were interested in this alligator. They said, "Sure, we'll take it." So we took the alligator over there, and it worked out very well. And many years later, I saw the alligator. It got to be a good-sized animal.
Really?
Really, yeah. Got to be 6-7 feet long, you know. At least as I recall.
And that's where you met Burr Steinbacher at the University of
Illinois, yeah. Or University of Washington University St. Louis, the biology department.
Right.
Burr Steinbacher was a great teacher.
Talk about some of the questions he would ask on his test.
Well, I mean, here it is. In his question, I took these courses were back from 1946 or 47. 46. 46, I guess. Must have been 46. And he'd say, you read in most amazing stories of amoebae that are 5 foot in diameter that are going around engulfing little children in a local swimming hole. He said, if you believe that this to be true, how must this amoeba differ from the ordinary amoeba proteus as you know it? And of course, it allowed you to wax eloquently on the necessary Fick's law of diffusion and
square cube
and the inverse square law and the circulation, respiration. Oh, you could go on forever, you know. But they were such great questions, and he had another. Oh, he had always nice questions like that. That made you laugh, you know.
You know, his son went on to produce Newton's Apple, which is a TV science program.
Newton's Apple?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No way!
Yeah. His son is named, they call him Putty, but what was
Putty, yes, Putty.
his name was, real name, I forget. But anyhow, yeah, he's the producer for
And
Newton's
that
Apple.
was up in Minneapolis, wasn't it, or something?
Yeah, that's right. In St.
Is
Paul,
that still
actually.
going
Yeah.
on, or?
It's been on and off, and I don't know what the current.
They have reruns of it
Yeah.
sometimes, but I'm not sure if it's the same.
But-
Education Channel, I take it?
Burr Steinbacher was a neat guy. He could get more work out of you just without doing anything, just by he was a great inspiration to make you want to work.
True mentor.
Oh God, he was great. He was marvelous. He's
Tell about some of the questions he'd ask.
well, I just
Oh, you did.
yeah,
Okay,
but
sorry.
I don't recall a lot of those in great detail. But it's like you're a rotifer's a wheel. You're a rotifer raising herds of amoebae for your relatives or something like that. And the food for the amoebae costs $10 per micropound or something like that. Which would you rather raise, large amoebae or small amoebae, and why? And then he had another one that I can recall. You're up at Pikes Peak. You have a fat dog and a skinny dog. Which one has the best chance of survival and why?
Yeah,
And,
He's a fat
and
dog,
he said,
wasn't it?
you're on a desert island,
yeah.
and a bottle washes up. The label's been washed off. You have Arbacia eggs and seawater and Eladio leaves or something like that. How would you go about determining the contents of that bottle? Oh,
And wasn't there one about, did you hear the most amazing stories
Yes,
of a
yeah.
huge amoeba in the local
Yeah,
street?
I already
Okay,
did that, yeah.
Okay.
yeah. But here's really, he was a wonderful delight to know. And I must say, I really dug him. Yeah.
Good deal.
Tell us about your early marriage life. There's a thing about a radiator that the water pump that didn't work in your car, and you
That was
pumped it by
the word
hand or something.
From Benz's.
Well, I'll tell you, in the early years of our residency, when Howie Gadboys and I had to go down to Presbyterian in Philadelphia to start our thoracic residency, I bought a car from Seymour Damari, Cy Damari, who was one of my friends from Boston City Hospital, 3rd Surgical Service. And Cy Damari sold me this car for like $10 or some ridiculous thing. It was an old, I can't remember what kind of what. I think of like an old Ford, and it was a coupe, and the engine ran like crazy. It was like it was a V8 engine. But somewhere along the line, there was a leaky radiator system, or there was something that wasn't right in the heat exchange or what have you. And so we got down, the thing would heat up, we drive for 10 miles, and it would heat up, we have to stop and put some water into it and this kind of thing. And so finally, we got down to Armonk, and Howie Gadboys, who incidentally was a marvelous clarinet player, Howie Gadboys and I rigged up a little system with a great big 5-gallon watering thing with a pump handle and so forth. And we had it snake out to the thing. And so this thing, when it would start to heat up, we'd give a couple of squirts, the water would go down and have a cooling effect on the radiator, bring the temperature down. So therefore we could nurse maybe 25 miles, and enough to go down the Pennsylvania Turnpike to get down to Philadelphia, which we eventually did. The thing that I do not recall, though, was what the hell I ever did with that car.
You know, I thought that car was the one from Benz's that we bought.
Was that what it was?
I thought that was the Benz's
It
car
could
that
have been
we
the
bought,
Benz's car.
and
Could have
then, but the thing of it was that every time you drove it out on the highway, you'd get stopped by the cops because it was a kind that a lot of hot rodders used to put a very powerful engine in. And
What about,
That's very, very vague in my mind. I just don't remember that.
there was something about when you were in med school or something like that, where you were trying to listen to the tapes and you were taping the lectures and
you probably did play them at night when you were
sleeping and you would...
All I can say is it didn't work.
Yeah, but I mean, there was, who was it out in Cleveland who would...
Jack Fraser?
Jack Fraser, who talked about that, and you'd be sitting there like, speak up a little, speak up a little.
The other thing I remember about medical school that always impressed me is that you had to apply 3 times or something like that.
Oh, I had to apply many times because right at that time, during World War II, a lot of people went into medicine to get out of the Army. And that was never the case with me. I can only say that I just kept applying, and then eventually I got in.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
What did your father do after the... How old were you when the Harrison Machine Works folded? And what did your father do after that?
Well,
I never...
that was a time when I was away most of the time. Daddy had, for a short time, he had a job as a night clerk in a hotel. And
He was a night clerk in a hotel.
for a short time, yeah. But he was a very proud man, and eventually I think he just retired. And I was not there to see those details because I was away.
Was it a trauma to the family?
Oh, of course it was, to a certain extent, to have the whole thing go under, which it eventually did. And
Who was the night clerk? Your grandfather?
my father.
Yeah,
For
but
a
then
short
he went
period.
on and he had an engineering job with the
Oh, that's
Army
right,
Corps
that's
of
right,
Engineers
that's right.
in St.
Then
Louis
he
after
joined
that,
he
Jim.
joined the Corps of
I think.
Engineers in St. Louis, and he worked with them for a number of years. He used to commute, and this same Mr. Goss, who with the alligator, used to commute with him, and they were friends,
take a break here for a second.
I'm trying to think as to the relationship of Uncle Bob, Robert Waugh, Bob Waugh, W-A-U-G-H. And I know that he has something to do with the early formation of the Harrison Machine Works back in the 1850s, 60s, or 70s, someplace back in there. And his wife was Aunt Ollie. And I believe that she was, I'm not sure, but I think she was a sister of my grandmother Harrison, who was my father's mother. And so Aunt Ollie, though, I remember talking to her. There's several things about Aunt Ollie. We used to drop by to see them on Sunday nights, and they would always give these. I don't know if you've ever seen these pink PKs, but are little chewing gum things that Wrigley's used to have. They weren't like a regular stick, but they were little
Cubes?
They weren't cubes.
Like a lozenge or
Like a
something,
lozenge
and
or
chewing
sort
the
of thing,
hard,
like a-
crusty
and you
outside.
chewed it, but they were pink. And these pink PK, they always have those. But anyhow, Aunt Ollie, I remember her telling me, and they lived in a house that was only about a block and a half from the public square. And of course, she recalled very clearly that when she was about 4 years old, she was out in the street and she saw her mother and father coming down the street, and they were crying. And she said, "What's the matter?" And they said, "The president, that's Lincoln, had been shot and killed." And so that was an eyewitness type of thing of her recollection, at least of the way it happened.
Tell about
What
the
is
Lincoln bed.
yeah? What's the? How does that tie in with the Lincoln bed?
Well-
John Scheel or somebody?
Well, John Shale,
Scheel.
S-C-H-E-E-L. Now, John Shale, remember, he was, I think, the father of Peg Shale, Olive, and Goulin. And there was another, maybe Elsie was in there too, who was down in Mobile. And I honestly cannot recall all the intricacies of the way that was, but at any rate, John Shale had been a friend of the Lincoln, apparently, in his early political days in the 40s. What was the year of that Lincoln bed? Do you have?
56.
Was it 56?
Was it
I don't remember.
I don't remember. But anyhow, that's not important. But anyhow, so the Abraham Lincoln gave an address from the second-story balcony of the house that used to be 1 block from the public square, and which is now the site of the junior high school. And Dick Hilgard, who was a cousin of mine, and I were more or less on display when the DAR put up a plaque on the high school, on the wall, on the outside wall, which is on the Illinois Street side of that, and commemorating the fact that Lincoln stayed there. Well, anyhow,
Is this in Belleville?
yes.
Okay.
At any rate, I think there were 2 of these walnut beds, and this one that we have is one that my father somehow or other got a hold of that had been painted with white paint or green paint or something. Beautiful, solid walnut piece of furniture, and actually for the time period, and that's back. This is over. God, it's almost 150 years old, and it is really remarkably modern in its appearance, So at any rate, though, this bed, Daddy fixed it up and decided it would be a nice thing if it would go to the oldest male, and so I gave it to Slater. Slater's going to give it to Tox, and pass it on down that way, hopefully.
And your dad put the brass plaque on it.
Daddy got the brass plaque put on it, and so forth. Along with that, the Illinois Historical Society, which I was never really active in, and actually I became more active after I left town. But at any rate, this Lincoln bed, though, that is a legitimate antique, and that's probably the only that's really a real antique that we have. It probably is worth a few bucks. But at any rate, it comes to mind when you talk about Lincoln, and one of the papers that was circulated by the Historical Society was a history of all the duels fought in St. Clair County, which of course was the county that Belleville was in. And it included some, way back to 17-something when a French soldier or somebody else got into a fight over a girl down in so-and-so, and one was killed in a duel or something like that. And of course, duels were legal up until about, 1850 or 60 or something like that. But somewhere along the line, there's a story in there about Abraham Lincoln, which I think is a delightful story. And he was challenged to a duel. And of course, the person who is challenged to the duel has a choice of the weapons. And so he chose sabers at 12 feet. And so they were 12 feet away, with the sabers, sort of waving them around, and everybody got laughing so hard they called off the duel.
What if they gave a war and nobody came?
Oh God! But I
remember that story.
Oh, I think that's a wonderful story.
Yeah. What about some of the holidays?
Yeah, traditions and the holidays.
Family traditions and holidays.
Well, we had our holiday traditions about Christmas. My father was he was just a genius at making things such as a puppet stage, or a doll house, or a battlefield, and if you could, or a train layout, or something like that, or a castle. And he did all these things, like he would take two round Quaker Oats boxes, and set them as the towers. And then he would take cardboard and glue, the old-fashioned glue, which we have a glue pot downstairs, but no goddamn glue we can't use it because the glue isn't available.
They don't make that kind of glue anymore.
They don't even make it anymore. But it's the kind of thing that would lend substance to a structure like a piece of cardboard. And then he would take and paint over it. And it was just beautiful. And then he'd get some soldiers or something like that, and he'd always have it. He was a real nut on accuracy, I think, and he just did a beautiful job. And he would always make one major thing for each kid of something.
Each holiday?
No, each Christmas, or at least many Christmases, or some Christmases. When you got to the point where you got a little older, you didn't,
Right.
you outgrew it.
Right.
But it was always, those Christmases were always good. And what we would do about a week before, they would ward off with sheets and thumbtacks and so forth, and completely blank out the room, so that no one was allowed to go in there because, quote, Santa Claus was working on it, or Santa Claus's workshop, or some kind of thing like that. Cripes. And so. Then on Christmas Eve, we always used to have a sort of a family gathering. It would be a varied group of people. My grandfather and Aunt Arena would come often, and I'm trying to think of who else would come. I can't. Maybe Aunt Peg Shale would come.
Cousin Zoe?
No, Cousin Zoe never came to Christmas. She would come over once in a while, but she was not that involved with that kind of thing. But anyhow.
Is this Zoe after whom Meg got her little?
Yeah, right.
For $1,000 bucks?
Well, I don't know. But that's another subject.
Okay.
And what did you eat?
But at any rate, so what we ate, for some reason or other, my father always loved oyster stew.
Right.
So we would have oyster stew and little sandwiches. And then when I was in about the first grade or so, at the Douglas School, I don't know who it was, but they talked about nice things for holidays, and they talked about this salad, which you could use for Christmas time, which consisted of a circular piece of pineapple and a banana for the stalk of the candle, a maraschino cherry for the flame, and a wok of mayonnaise dripping down to be the tallow. And so this thing, I told Mom about this, so we had this ham salad, and cripes almighty, now 65 years later, however many 60 years later, we're still doing it. and of course the oyster stew also. And so that sort of became a tradition, holiday tradition. I can't think much about Easter.
There's something that Lori said about how Christmas just sort of went on for many days almost.
Well, it
Follow
did,
the
sort of.
German tradition. Your
well-
timing was different because you were in the German community.
We used to have our Christmas on Christmas Eve, but then the next day we'd go over to Christmas dinner at my grandfather's, Apple's. Apple's, yeah.
That was your.
He was the lawyer,
Okay.
the judge, and district attorney, and my mother's father. And we have another Christmas over there. And then another really nice person was my grandmother Harrison. She was a real gem. And she used to smoke these terrible cigarettes. Yeah, and she smoked 20 grand cigarettes. That was the name of 20 grand. And my God, they were like little stogie cigars, you know.
Was that proper in those days?
Well, I mean, she did it, and she said she was going to do it, you know. And Anna Rena smoked, you know. And
Really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, she smoked.
Oh, Anna Rena smoked like a fish. And so, at any rate, though,
You had little roach holders.
uh,
When you guys went there, once you picked them up, and they were little roach holders from
Yeah.
the end of this. She smoked them right down to this.
yeah, yeah.
And Aunt Arena. Hey, Jim, what was the time when you came home from school?
I remember. Yeah. You know how it is. Sometimes you get to be. I was going to the Douglas School, which meant it had to be in the first 6 grades. And I came home. I used to go home for lunch. We used to walk. You know, well, it was about probably a mile or so. And
How long did you have?
Three-fourths. Well, we had an hour for lunch. And so we'd walk home. And so I said, I don't know what the hell I said, but I was bitching about the food or something like that. And my mother said, and what would your Highness like? I said, how about some roast duck? And somehow or other, somebody gave us a roast duck, and she pulled out this damn roast duck. Of course, I about flipped. And he said, is there anything else, Your Highness? And of course, it takes the wind out of your sails.
Oh, I always love that story.
Yeah, true story. True story. But another holiday that was a pretty good holiday, my father used to love this. This used to do more for him than anything, was the 4th of July. And he used to love to make firecracker cannons for us.
Oh,
And
yeah.
cherry bomb cannons. We still have the cherry
Yeah, we
bomb
still
cannon
have.
downstairs. That is a work of art. Because what you do, you've got your bigger chamber, which is about the size of the cherry bomb, which allows you to put the cherry bomb in, fuse down into another smaller chamber, which is filled with black powder. And that leads up to a fuse hole going down into it. And then so you would take a firecracker, tear off one end of it, put it down in there so that the fuse stuck out, you know, and then you'd have it filled with black powder, you'd have the cherry bomb down there, and then you'd light this thing, and it would kick it up into the air, light the cherry bomb, and the damn thing would go up about 500, 700 feet up in the air. And as a matter of fact, one time, when Tom was at the Fidel house, apparently, he gave a bombardment to the Beta house when he sang marching these things over. And you know, But anyhow, that's a marvelous cannon. That really is neat.
Yeah.
And then my father had an old Civil War type of breech loader, and he made a wonderful firecracker cannon out of that. That was really neat. And we used to put firecrackers in, and light them and put the breech down, and bang, they go out. We used the zebra firecrackers, they were really, really good firecrackers.
How about some of the things you did at the fraternity when you talk about the Phi Belt and so on? What about some of those things you did with various tricks?
Well, we had a really a very good we had a very good house, Phi Delta Theta at Washington University, and although there's some things I didn't care about it, the prejudice, I honestly, truly, a guy named Bill Herbert and I were two of the only people that really objected to the fact that they didn't want to take certain groups of people. And we of course, when you're in a thing like that, you're in a minority, and this was back in the 1940s. It was after World War II, and I went back to try to complete my pre-med. And but I remember that very well. There was a nice boy who came from someplace in the east, and Bill Herbert and I thought he was a nice guy. Yeah. And the guy was put down,
You say he was a black guy?
What? No, he was Jewish. And he was a nice guy. So, but anyhow, things were starting to, the cracks in the pavement were starting at that time.
What do you mean?
Well, in other words, the prejudicial areas were starting to bend and fold and break up. So that I don't know how many years later it was, but at least it's little things that kind of add up. It's awfully hard to do those things by revolution. It just is very difficult to do,
So it's a gradual thing.
When you're in the middle of it and you've lived with it all your life, and that's the way it was. That's the way the rules were. It's awfully hard for you to say, well, look, we ought to cut these rules out and start over with new rules. Very hard to do. Very hard to do. But anyhow, we used to have some wonderful. When World War II came in, and the Phi Delta, we lost our house. Everybody was going into service at that time, and we used to have some water fights and things like that. Oh, they were great, and they were just one of the house was made of concrete and steel. You couldn't harm it, and but oh gosh. One time, Johnny Bechtold and Johnny Nussel and I got into, a rough and tumble type of thing, and damn it, I fell out of the second-story window and landed on a Coke bottle, and I could have been hurt, and they looked at me, and so I was okay though. And another time, we had a guy who was kind of a tool, and so. Occasionally people would stack a room, where you go in and just take everything and just combobulate it. But anyhow, in this particular guy, what we did, we rounded up all the dogs in the neighborhood we could find and put them in this guy's room. And of course, when he comes home, there are about 20 dogs come rushing out when he opens his door, And of course, there was a lot of dog poop and so forth all over the place. That was a pretty good thing. Another thing that was pretty good was one time there was a guy named Malcolm. No, what the hell was his name? I can't remember. It was Malcolm Bliss or something like that. But he was a nice guy. He was in the business school. I may have his name mixed up with somebody. But anyhow. And this was during summer school. We were busting our rocks, going down to school at 7:30 in the morning, working till late at night. And he was in the business school. He took some snap course, And he'd come in half plowed every night. He'd been out drinking beer. And so we slept in the third floor dormitory. And so what we did, he was sleeping away one time about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 o'clock. And we saw him sleeping away there. So what we did, we ran a hose up the side of the house into the room and then pointed it right down on his head. And then at an appointed time, we turned the damn thing on, and gave him a bath, So I think Nutsel and Beck helped us with that. But those are some good times. Oh hell, there are some other things that I remember one time. Some of the Mahafs.
What are Mahafs?
Well, some of the upperclassmen were messing around. They were having a meeting of sorts in the house manager's room, which was up on the 3rd floor. The toilets were on the 2nd floor. And so I filled a balloon full of water. And the way was all cleared. I had a few Confederates in order to either get in the way or slow things down. And so I stood by this hallway and threw this water balloon, hit the door, completely sprayed the room, and then rapidly ran down one flight of stairs, sat down on a john, and proceeded to have a bowel movement. And of course they came running down. They had their paddles. They were all excited. Okay, Thumper, this and that, and so forth. You do this. Really screaming their heads off. I said, well, come on, get up. I said, well, no, wait a second. Let me finish, and I cleansed myself. I said, okay. And of course they were absolutely flipped because here was a bowl full of feces. And the other guys, of course, didn't let on of what was going on, and they never did find out who the hell was.
Quick Thumper in the West.
Oh God. I sort of regret that I didn't. I went into the service as a volunteer inductee. I wasn't drafted.
No kidding.
And well, they were going to draft me, so I thought, well, hell, why don't I go in and try to get a choice, a little bit of a choice out of it. So
Wait, wouldn't you get exempt from your medical thing, or had you not?
No, because you had to get accepted to medical school for that, you see. And that meant that there were about 40 applicants for every position in medical school at that time. Maybe more. Could have been more. But a terrible, terrible, terrible stress on the bell-shaped curve. With all the people who didn't particularly want medicine, they just wanted to get the hell out of the Army. A lot of them. That was the case of a lot of the people, not all. But
Was there pro-German sentiment in Belleville?
pro-German sentiment? No,
I mean-
not. There was during World War I am told, but not during World War II.
Did people actually then step on their German past?
Slater, I didn't spend enough time around Belleville during that period of time to really be an authority on that at all. And I can't recall off the top of my head any special instance of things that happened or something like that. So I don't know about that. But I went in as a volunteer inductee at Camp Grant, someplace up around Chicago or someplace, Winnetka, I don't know, someplace up there. And then thought I'd join the Air Force, and Hap Arnold's Air Force, and thought, well, why not be I had a chance to be an aviation cadet. Sweetie, this thing's falling apart.
Oh, all right.
And
Why
so,
don't you finish that story and then we can...
okay, and then so
Yeah.
I got into aviation cadets. They gave me all these goddamn tests. Of course, I scored pretty high. They had things called stay nines, and you'd go into things and you'd flip buttons and toggle switches, and that was supposed to tell you depth perception things and all these tests. That was supposed to tell you whether you were suited for it or not,
You were going to actually fly? They were going to get you ready to fly or just navigate?
Training.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I had.
You know how to
You're
fly?
a navigator.
Bombardier, navigator, pilot, the only thing I didn't want to be a pilot. I really didn't. That was lowest on my priority.
But didn't you have to get a little training in that single engine airplane?
I did. I had 10 hours in the Piper Cup.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I never soloed though.
Yeah.
But that was up at Michigan State, where we had college training detachment is what they called it. And those are some nice, I must confess, I don't think I ever really took advantage of the time in the Army. I kind of goofed off those couple of years,
Oh, I don't mean to interrupt, but tell them about the time when you were playing at a dance in Texas when you were in the Army and you were playing, and it was a dance where a lot of black people were
Oh,
out in the...
later on, towards the end of the war, and of course, you'll recall at this time, this was 1944, 1945, you'll recall that that most branches of service were still segregated. And at this base in Texas, and it may have been Big Bend, I'm not sure what it was, but I belonged to the post band because people were being discharged, and so I got to be the post drummer, and we had a jazz group that was really it was a good group.
What kind of trap set would you play? What would you have, like
Oh,
a
God,
bass,
I don't.
a cymbal, a hi-hat?
You know something? You had a hi-hat, I had a snare, maybe one tom, and a cymbal or something like that.
Really basic kit.
Really basic things. And they were all Army stuff, you know. And so anyhow, we were going to be the band to play at a rest camp thing, which was all black, and which was a pretty interesting evening. We started playing around 9 o'clock. Had been set up there. God, it was out in some godforsaken place out in the hills of Texas someplace, you know, where dirt road leading in, dirt road leading out, you know, maybe half a mile in, half a mile out, and nothing out there except a little shack, you know, that had a dance floor. And as I recall, they had a lot of the people who worked on the post base were black, and some of them were. For instance, there was one gal who worked in, wasn't a bad-looking gal, black, who was worked on the chow line, you know. And we called her, somehow she picked up the nickname Caledonia. And that was about the time that Woody Herman had his great tune, you know, Caledonia, Caledonia, what makes your big head so hard? And swinging thing from the Woody Herman herd that was playing that thing at that time. And I can't remember who actually started the Caledonia thing. It may have been the guy that was one of the early rhythm and blues fellows. Oh, cripes, come on. What's his name? It's right on the tip of my tongue. There ain't nobody here. Louis Jordan. It may have been Louis Jordan who first had one. It was one of those guys who were doing things like that. But anyhow, so Caledonia saw me, and you know, we were just friendly greeting type of thing, you know, going to the chow line. But at any rate, they were out there, and everybody was in their formal dresses, you know, and they were drinking something like pink lemonade out of their paper cups, you know. And of course, at the one intermission, the raucous that started to build up, you know, as the gin, whatever the hell they were drinking, you know, began to flow a little more freely. And at the first intermission, they had either catfish or chicken. The second intermission, they had chicken or catfish. I don't remember the order. But then, about somewhere along the line, and after the second intermission, one of the gentlemen, and I might add that you had all these other people from the city dressed up, and you had all these Negro servicemen, black servicemen, and you had all these dignified gentlemen who were part of the black stability middle class of the area, and they were impeccable.
Yeah,
And
I know what you mean.
You know,
it's
and
they
they
class and
They
impeccability.
were really. This was no schlock outfit. Right. People. They were nice people. So at any rate, one man came up and he grabbed the mic and he started to sing blues. And we sang blues, call and response thing that they were coming out. We just furnished the background.
Yeah.
Blew our minds apart.
Yeah.
Absolutely blew our minds apart. It was one of the most nicest experiences I can ever recall in music. And of course, then all of a sudden, somewhere along the line, after this has been going for a while, Judas Priest, two women started a fight right out about 10 feet, 15 feet in front of the dance floor. I don't know if you've ever seen two women fight it's the goddamnedest thing you've ever seen in your life. And they were fighting, clawing. They took off their shoes, hitting each other with their shoes, with the spikes, spiked heels, you know. And it really got to the point where finally, Caledonia, incidentally, and there was beginning raucous, unrest, real unrest. We didn't know what the hell was going to happen, Christ, we didn't know what was coming on. And I pulled my drums back a little bit to try to, pull them into the corner, try to protect them. And all of a sudden, Caledonia came up and she said, "Do you mind if I stay here?" or something like that. And she was looking for protection. Hell, the lights went out. And then there was some guy who was a ranking officer. There was a staff sergeant or something like that. He had a 5,000 mission crush in his hat, had a bunch of medals on his chest. And he jumped in and he barked orders and this and that. And about 3 or 4 guys picked up one woman, carried her out the side door. 3 or 4 guys picked up the other woman, carried her out the side door. What the hell they do? They get around front, started their fight out in front of the building again, But that broke the thing up, and about that time, the TAC officer said it's time for us to get out of here, so we got out, But that was really a very moving evening, and it was a very nice evening too. That was a good experience. It really was. Everybody was gassed. We were really very, very up after that. Talking about some things, and I hope that Mom wanted to hear. She was amazed that I was aware of my teachers, starting with Miss Neuhaus.
In what? Kindergarten or first grade?
Kindergarten.
Uh-huh.
Douglas School, Belleville, Illinois, and then Miss Dice, first grade. Miss Keck, second grade. Miss Miner, third grade. Anastasia Cloud, the fourth grade. Miss Shoemaker, who was kind of a hot sketch.
What do you mean?
Well, she just she was a nice person. I just liked her. We got along very well. We were kind of friends. And then Mr. Creed became the principal, taking the place of a Miss Reese, who was a very nice person. And then we went. That was a Douglas school, 6th grade. Then we went down to junior high school.
Yeah.
Which 7th grade, I started to get involved with band and solo contests for drumming. And we started winning contests at the state level, solo. And Miss Charles Muckenstern was my band leader, who was a very good band leader. He was really one of these good old-fashioned guys. Didn't have all the credentials, but delivered, And he died a couple of years ago, not too long ago. So forth. There were some other teachers there that were good teachers. Miss Wiekert was in 7th grade, and I have a block here now on one. Miss Haber. Miss Haber is a teacher that was especially a favorite. She was such a nice lady.
What'd she do?
Well, she used to wear these things that fit up on your neck, like little lace things.
Yeah, I've seen the
She
pictures.
was an old timer,
Yeah.
And she and her sister used to live down on Main Street, across from Viley's print shop, or someplace down there. And we were involved in Cub Scouts, believe it or not. I passed all 99 Cub tests. But after that, I went to one Boy Scout thing and never went back.
Yeah, I did this similar thing.
Yeah. So at any rate, though, when we were in our den everybody played a musical instrument.
Uh-huh.
And Bobby Grove played clarinet.
Uh-huh.
Dick Hilgard played piano accordion.
Uh-huh.
Jack Wallen played clarinet. Hook Heineman played trumpet, and I played drums.
Yeah. Did you play a trap set?
Yeah, we tried to, you know. But I wasn't much of a jazz person at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I must say that wasn't really related. None of those guys are really jazz related. And in later years, the only person that ever went on into the jazz idiom at all was yours truly, for reasons that I've never understood.
Why do you think?
Russell Sprague was also in there, I think, and he had a guitar. And then later, Stan Sprague, his younger brother, who was a real good guy, and Elaine. That when later on, he was working for the what the hell's that stuff the super stuff you
Super glue?
put in your
Drainer.
car? No, ESP or something. No,
STP.
STP. He worked for the STP Corporation as a consultant. He kind of retired to that, and he was living down in Boca Raton, and so we had a lot of. Did you go down to his house, or was that Abby? We went down. We watched a football game or something. His wife's name was Elaine, and then there was another lady from Belleville named Ann Brandenburger.
I remember Anne. I remember
Ann
her.
Brandenburger Weigel, and Becky remembers her because Becky went down with us one time, and she and Ann got along very well, as I recall. There was just a good scene. But anyhow, Stan Sprague, we're breaking away from things. We're sort of wandering about this, but Stan was really a neat guy. And when I was breaking up the Florida house, you know, all the furniture and stuff.
From your father.
What?
Of your father's.
Of my dad's.
Yeah.
Right. Stan and Elaine were very helpful, and you know, we had some good times together. You know, and it was a neat thing. And there's one phenomena that went on in Florida that I will never understand in a million years, and that is if you put something out on the street in front of your house, whether it be a cardboard box, some false flowers, or whatever, no matter what the hell it would be, as junky or as good, the next morning it would always be gone. And it's just crazy. And if you want to get rid of something, just put it out on the street, and boom, it's gone. And it's crazy. But getting back to Belleville, the junior high school, I played in the band there and so forth.
These state competitions, Dad, were they regimental drumming or rudimentary drumming?
Rudimental drumming. You had to do some rudiments, and you had to play a drum solo, and generally you had to sight read a piece of music, which I really wasn't that great sight reading it, you know.
And that pulled you down.
And that really was one of the mistakes that I made in my lifetime. I wish I'd taken piano and learned how to really be a good reader. That's important. You got to do that. As a matter of fact, you ought to do that. No, I mean that.
I know, I thought of it.
But at any rate, so then about when I went to high school, well then a bunch of guys came together, I mean friends, Jack Wallen and Hook Heineman, Russell Sprague, Bubber Healy, Buddy Paul, Dutch Denton, Johnny Nutzel, Johnny Bechtold, a bunch of us got together. We really became quite good friends. And I was, most of those, they were into sports and were pretty good about it. I only weighed about 115 pounds when I went to high school. 85 pounds when I went to high school. I mean, I was really stunted, you know. And so anyhow, but I was football manager for 4 years, which I enjoyed with Tabe, Mr. Tabor. I don't know, do any of you kids remember meeting Mr. Tabor? Because I know that I took some of the kids out there to meet him and his wife Mary, who was a very nice, very lovely lady, who died of ALS, believe it or not.
What's ALS?
Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, same thing Lou Gehrig died of. And at any rate, what else? This was, of course, you know, in part when I was going to high school, I went there in '38. You know, this was still, the Depression was still on. And it's interesting, the effects of the Depression. that we didn't feel it too much. In fact, we took a little bit of flack because of quoted those Rich Harrisons or something like that, which really wasn't true at all. But for instance, my father had his vacation in the wintertime, so we'd go to Florida. And I'd come back and I'd drop out of school, have to do the extra work and all that sort of thing, and generally get a little bit of bad flack for it, and somewhere along the line, you know how it is. And then I sensed the idea that they felt that, well, I was one of those rich kids or something like that, you know, and took a little bit of that kind of flack that you can't take, which is too bad.
We know. We took some of it too.
Did you? Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. Pure baloney.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, what are some of the other things of from down there? Incidentally, today is the 12th of June, I believe, or isn't that right, 12th of June?
1992.
1992, correct. And
12th or 13th, whatever.
I think it's the 13th.
okay, it's the
What the
13th,
hell ever.
12th or 13th,
Saturday.
Saturday, anyhow. And right now I'm coming through a period where I'm trying to find a measure of sensible control of this chest pain. And the fact that there's so few people can appreciate the fact that pain, with something like this where I got a chest tube in the goddamn thing, pain like this does not come from just one thing. But there's an irritation of the whole chest wall. There's the fact that I'm depressed, the depression factor, because if you are depressed, any little detrimental thing is magnified completely out of sensibility. So you got that factor, and you got the soreness factor, you got the almost arthritic factor, and you got the tube irritation factor that's lying right across one of those nerves and really hurts on occasion. And some of you kids saw what happened when Tim Meacham put in a, I guess you'd call it a intrapleural catheter of some sort, or something to try to get down to those nerves, and did a good job of it. And literally, I was going crazy. And in a matter of minutes, after injecting this material, this Marcaine 0.5%,
The local.
into here, which unfortunately communicates with my empyema cavity, and which some of it sort of leaks out there, which is a two-edged sword because it kind of irrigates it, which I've been trying to get them to do anyway. But at any rate, the relief of that was not complete because I felt a component of something else. I needed something else. So I've been trying to juggle the various ways of, this thing has now gone over 8 hours, this block that I have on now. But I also took some Tylenol number 4, somewhere along the line, and I took some Advil. So what we're trying to plan on do is to see if we can't find a way to stretch this out a bit. And one of the guys, Rich McCormick, was just here, and he suggested that I let this go as long as it would go, and then go ahead and block it again. And after about a half an hour or so, then see how much benefit you get from it. And you do get benefit right away, but it's not as complete as it is right now. Like right now, I've got almost complete benefit. And so then in a half an hour, 45 minutes after the block, then take a Tylenol number 4.
So you took Tylenol 4 this morning?
Honey, I can't give you the exact time. We have it written down up there.
But today?
Stretching it out, though, not right now. And then the Advil, picking up the other kind of pain, which is the muscle soreness pain type of thing. It's almost an arthritic situation. So that's where things stand on that now. How the hell we get off on that subject, I don't know.
Well, this is where
But
you
anyhow,
are today.
What?
This is where you are today.
This is where I am today, right. And I'm really trying to find a way so I can function about the way I do now.
Yeah.
And not be bogged down and be a zombie. And not have a lot of pain. because the pain is very intimidating. And it when it's severe like this, I mean, that was severe. And everybody who saw that, it was really dramatic too. Yeah.
Will you tell some family sayings? Yeah, we've got a lot of sayings.
Sayings, family sayings?
Yeah, like...
Well, my mother used to say, you ought to have a bowel movement every day, because if you don't, it's like carrying it around in a paper bag. You know? And is that the kind of thing you need?
Anything.
Yeah.
Anything.
And my father used to say, if the dog hadn't have stopped, he'd have caught the rabbit. And
That's good. I never heard that.
and what else? What other kinds of things are there like that?
Blow straight ahead and strive for tone.
Yeah, that was something that Howie Gadboys told me. That was not original with me. And
Don't do dumb things.
don't do dumb things, of course.
Could you elaborate on that a little?
Well, it's just that that living life is such a pain in the ass and so much trouble anyhow. Why clutter it up with doing dumb things? You know.
But Dad, don't you think dumb things are inevitable, for crying out loud?
I know, but you ought to at least consciously try to avoid as many of them as possible.
Well, duh. You know?
Listen, we don't want to forget to divvy up the camera
Yeah.
lenses.
I brought the other camera.
Oh, did you?
That's-
Uh-huh.
It's upstairs.
Your things,
You know-
do with
none
that,
of them are going to
Mike?
work with those, sweetie.
This is the camera, the other one that I have.
Well,
The one that I bought.
Oh, the ones you bought. Well, a Leica.
Mm-hmm.
It may work and it may not.
Let's just see.
Okay, all right. Okay.
So you don't want to tell the story about the crayons?
The what?
Buying the crayons?
Your mom,
Oh, well,
what happened?
Yeah.
You know, it's there's a certain immaturity in all of this. This is back in the Depression where pennies counted, and I needed some crayons.
How old were you?
Oh, I was in the first or second grade or something. And so, what I did, they had various kind of crayons. They had crayons where you had got 6 crayons, or where you got 12 crayons. So the 12 crayons cost a little bit more. So I said, I need this for the crayons and so forth and so on, and it'll be so much sense. So what I did, I went in and bought the cheaper ones, and then when I bought a goddamn chocolate popsicle, which I didn't have enough time to eat even, and which I ended up throwing half of it away. You know, it's the most stupid thing. And that's where some of the start of the thing, don't do dumb things. I think back, that was a dumb thing for me to do. Strictly a dumb thing for me to do. What else? What else? Huh. My dad used to play good tennis, and he and another guy were 60 years old. They were a 60-year-old duel, and they used to knock off these younger guys. And the thing of it is, you see, there's a guy named Matt Crumrick, and they had a floral shop and a tennis court. And Daddy used to cover the back court, and Matt would cover the front court. And my father could still move even though his knees were giving him trouble. But it's really funny. At times they even go to the semifinals, things like that, playing some pretty damn good tennis players. But my father had good strokes, and he had a serve. Honest to Pete, he put topspin on it, and that damn tennis ball looked like a goose egg coming over. And it would bounce and go the way you wouldn't think it's going to go, And I don't think I ever beat him in anything in my life like that,
Really?
Yeah, he always beat me in tennis, certainly.
At sports and stuff?
What? Yeah.
Did you-
Look, but in tennis, he could always outdo me, And that was a sport. He was pretty good at tennis. And I was really never really good at anything, but adequate at a lot of things. I could step into a baseball game or a basketball game or anything like that, And get along, not to completely mess it up. But I wasn't brilliant by any means either. I had good mobility, good coordination. Not very fast, I wasn't blessed with speed,
Yeah.
What else? What else? Shut it off. Is that fresh film in there, or is that somebody else's film?
Whoops, hang on.
It asked me how I got the name Thumper. Well, when I was in high school, I was on the odd, they don't have this anymore, but I was on the odd year, half year that is, so that I graduated in February of 1942 in order to go to college. Remember the Pearl Harbor, oh, I gotta tell you about where we were in Pearl Harbor, how that came about. I think I've already done that though, haven't I? Last time? Sure, didn't I? Anyhow, I graduated in February 42 and went to college and lived in the dorm the first year. And then I wasn't prepared really for college. They didn't prepare me for college. And it would have been so easy to do so, but they didn't. So I joined the fraternity Phi Delta Theta, pledged. The pledges, one of the duties the pledge had to do was to carry nickels. So you could get a Coke out of the Coke machine. And the Cokes were a nickel apiece. And you get a bottle of Coke. So John Hawksley Melidio III, Jack Melidio, who is from St. Louis, and whose father owned the biggest and best fish market in town, the Melidio Fish Market downtown. And Jack said, "Thumper, get me a Coke," and it stuck. And I went over and got him a Coke and so forth. And they started calling me Thumper. And that's the way I got it.
But was it because of your drumming?
Yeah. But right about that time, close to that time, Walt Disney came out with Bambi and Thumper and so forth, And so I can't. I thought I had my name before his, but I'm not 100% certain of that, But I always like to think that I had my name, particularly from Melidio. He was sort of a character anyhow. He was a good guy, don't get me wrong. Good guy.
As pledges, that was your duty to run and get a Coke?
That was one of my duties. If an active wanted a Coke, I was supposed to have enough nickels to go do it. If you ran out of nickels and you didn't have it, they'd give you a swap. Yeah, big deal. What else?
How about the way you interacted with your siblings?
Well,
you were the oldest.
I was the oldest, yeah. And I was always in my own little world. I didn't play an awful lot with my brother Tom or my brother Lee.
Why?
I don't know, I just didn't. And I had my own circle of friends, and they would have their own circle of friends. And that's just the way we grew up, and I don't have any reason for that.
Were you much older than them, or?
Well, no, I don't think so, but it's just the way it worked out. I was a couple of years older than they were. And I don't know what to say about that. I don't have any good answer for that, except that we didn't have any grudges or something, although my brother Tom used to get very irked at me because I would drum in my head. I go, I hear all these things with these noises in my head, And we slept in the same room. And this literally used to drive him crazy. And he would get very angry at me when I drum in my head. And so, what the hell can I say, Brother Lee had quite a temper, and occasionally he would, Tom called him Pan Am. Pan Amnesia Kid or something like that, Don't ask me why. Jesus, you'll have to ask Uncle Bob that. Or Uncle Tom that. But he was called Pan Am for the longest time. he would say, well, what about Pan Am? And Pan Am was Lee. And it was crazy. I don't know where the connection came from. Maybe Tom can remember, you know. But and Helen, she was far enough down the ladder that I really didn't have a hell of a lot to do with her, you know. She was a baby sister, you know, and we kind of, you know, we looked after her a little bit. And we used to go to Florida and walk along the beach in the water, you know, and so forth. But when we did things, Tom was very good at doing something that I wasn't very good at. Like we'd build model airplanes. Tom was very, very good at that. At that time, and Lee, I don't know, it's weird the way we weren't a close interacting group of siblings, what have you, if you know what I'm saying. We didn't play together a lot. Friends would come over, I wouldn't necessarily join his friends and play. But as they got older, though, as we got older and after into World War II, Tom had his own crazy bunch of cronies too, you know, and he had some characters like Jack Tebanoff, who was the Crow, and he was either I could never get him straight. One guy, Jack Tebanoff, was oh Christ, he's a lawyer there now. But anyhow, one used to be the Crow, and the other was the Mole. And whenever they would come up there, my father would always say the snake and owl are here. And he loved to use a different word in there, you know.
Yeah.
That was really crazy. That was funny. The snake and the owl are here. God. And then, but then Brother Lee, he had his own circle of friends, you know. And they were like Harvey Ember, a very good friend of his, and like Brownie, Kenny Brown. Hell, they were some good guys. They used to harmonize. This thing, Tom used to like to do that. Tom would sing bass, and they would sing these things, and they'd sometimes sit out in the goddamn car at 2 o'clock in the morning. They'd be singing barbershop stuff like that. They were pretty good, you know. And I used to spend a lot of time. Didn't I talk about this, going to the hills with my grandfather, Apu, and